The happy golden family.
You're going down, down, down. Just call me smooth. Watch me do what I do, laying down perfect.
Welcome back to Beyond the Beermat, the podcasting equivalent of if it were a wrestler, Vince McMahon will be in love with it because it's so big. It's just so big.
Big and throbbing and sweaty.
Yes. We do our best to appeal to the masses, and if we don't appeal to the masses, we appeal to Vince McMahon directly and cater to his favour and then get ourselves over that way.
Notice me, make me famous too.
Sort of, yeah, I'll take it. Man, if Vince McMahon suddenly becomes a sponsor, we'll be like corporate shills all day long. I've got no problem in selling out.
Oh no, there's no issues with that.
No.
Fuck it. If there's dollar at the end of it,
Yeah, exactly.
ching ching bling bling, dollar dollar. Oh yes.
Man, the Shout Man's theme music, or alternatively, Donald Trump's theme music, which became the $1 Million Mania theme music, which becomes the theme music for any time money's involved ever. There was definitely someone else's theme music as well at some point. The money. It was
The
very
GM on WCW, the Pat, what was his name?
Ernest Miller.
That's the one.
He had Brodus Clay's theme tune
Oh
as
yeah.
well.
Oh, drats.
Yeah. That was really rather randomly, right? And this happens in WWE a lot. I should point out, by the way, just we're doing the intro, my name is Stuart Quigley. Alongside me is...
Matt.
Oh, okay.
Hello.
Well, your voice had already been heard at this point, so I just didn't know how you were going to do it. But yeah, just back to this whole idea of like, this happens in WWE a lot. I was watching a random segment on YouTube the other day, and it was Vince McMahon with the Funkadactyls, and then he... And I don't know if kayfabe, we're supposed to believe that the production truck is watching at all times. And if there's any sort of music cue or lighting cue, they just go with it. So like basically, there's some guy whose job it is to like, if he sees the boogeyman at any point on screen, he's got to get all the lights done and he's got to get that music going, sort of thing.
Yeah, get it prepped, ready.
Yeah. So like, basically, Vince was talking to the Funkadactyls and it was just a normal conversation. And then just out of nowhere he went, "Somebody call my baba." And then the music hit and then they all just started dancing, like as in most bullshit segments backstage in WWE are.
Including Vinny?
Yeah, Vince was giving it large.
Oh, yes.
Somebody called his mama and said, "Can you please tell your son to stop having young girls act to him in that way?"
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
But, okay, before we get into the main topic of discussion for today's podcast and wash the image almost with bleach, I'd rather go blind than see Vince McMahon do that for the 50th time in a row. But the question I was going to ask you, actually, before we get onto this, is I saw this on the internet the other day, and I think this is an easy sort of nice icebreaker into today's podcast. So you've got your WWE or your world champion as is right now, and they issue an open challenge. Either one, you can pick either one.
Yeah.
Whose music do you want to hit, and which champion do you want to be issuing the open challenge? Like, what would make you pop the most if you've got like either AJ Styles or Roman Reigns issuing an open challenge, and someone comes out? Which champion, and B, who do you want to come out?
The champion would have to be Roman Reigns, because I don't know actually. This is going back to what I remember of spending 4 nights watching SummerSlam, an hour a night. Man, what a struggle. But the whole angle AJ Styles was in with Samosa Joe, that was quite interesting. That old Samoa Joe calling out Wendy and having a go at the child and making a child cry in the crowd. It was good, and so I was enjoying that. I think if you got to go down the road of Roman Reigns, it would have to be...
Don't go like storyline wise, just go what would make you mark the most. Pick someone random, pick someone like, if you want the Brooklyn Brawler to challenge for the title, so be it.
Alright, either way, it's going to be Roman Reigns.
Okay.
So anyone out of all time?
Yeah, whose music do you want to hit?
Scott Hall, all day long.
Really?
Scott Hall, fucking amazing. The greatest wrestler that never was.
Okay, is Scott Hall coming out with the NWO? Because I think that's getting a pop.
Oh, that'd be tasty. Or he gets himself in shape, he stops knocking back the lagers, alright.
The idea of us telling him to knock back the lagers is very hypocritical also.
And he comes out. Turn him into Razor Ramon again. Hey man. It'd be amazing. 2 very large, tanned, greasy, black-haired men going at it, hammer and tong in the ring. It'd be wicked. They're just 2 big men. Their characters, they're so similar looking, aren't they?
Yeah.
They do look not identical, because one's Samoan apparently, and one's Cuban. I think.
Well,
So,
technically not, but like kayfabe Cuban, I think, which is a sentence I never thought I'd enjoy saying as much as I actually did.
yeah. But either way, no, man, I'd buy into that all day long.
Okay, fair enough. I think the one for me is quite funny because you went with Roman Reigns. Because I'm such a mark for work rate, #work rate. I've got to go with AJ Styles first of all. And there's like literally a list of names that are going on. I think you're shitting all over this, but not only do I want to see this match.
Are you going to say Shawn Michaels again?
No,
like
I'm
you say
not.
on every podcast?
No, I'm not. There's one other guy I mentioned on nearly every podcast. But
The
like
Hulkster.
Yeah, oh man, Hulk Hogan would be interesting. Jeez, can you imagine?
Hulk Hogan would go over AJ Styles.
Man, he's a vanilla midget as far as Hulk Hogan's
Yeah,
concerned.
exactly.
He's not a main event player, brother.
He'd have it no other way.
Brother. And then they set up a feud whereby AJ Styles is meant to get a DQ win over him. But do you know what would be better? If Hulk Hogan went over clean again.
Oh, the burial is complete. Back to Japan with you,
Yeah, exactly.
brother.
I think this would be a good match. I think this would pop the crowd and it would pop me. And again, I think you're going to hate it. Edge.
Don't bring Edge's name into it. He's done.
He's done.
He's getting no Daniel Bryan moment. He's not coming back.
I know. Daniel Bryan would be a good one as well, but I just think...
That'll happen sooner or later,
Yeah.
I imagine.
But the thing is that like, for that kind of moment where someone's calling someone out as an open challenge and it's not quite your usual competitor coming out, like, it's not like Big E's coming out, which, again, AJ Styles, Big E, I'd be fine with that if that's what we were given. You know, AJ Styles versus pretty much anyone you'd be fine with on paper. But the thing with this is that, like, you get that moment to pop the crowd. You need the music hit to be really spot on. And I think his is really good. Like, there's the obvious CM Punk one there, but I actually think Edge is more likely. And I know Edge is 0%. So...
Yeah, it'd be good if Edge came and challenged AJ Styles. The problem is, though, with this hypothetical question, you never get open challenges for the big belts. You only ever seem to get it for, like, the US Championship nowadays, and rarely the Intercontinental as well. It's because it almost seems like if you're in the position where you're putting the big top of the line belts on the line in open challenges, you haven't booked it correctly, and you haven't got an ongoing storyline like you really should. Like we said in the past, if everyone's ambition is to reach the top of the ladder and grab the big gold belt,
Like camera cuts backstage, everyone's falling over each other.
Yeah, they should all be clambering for that opportunity, and so that's why you can do it with the US title, because it's shit. No one really wants it anyway. Fuck it.
Man,
I don't want this
US
low tier
title.
belt.
Okay, I think also in that regard, it has been done before, and it was primarily done with The Undertaker, I think. This idea of like, I can't remember who it was that cut the promo. I want to say Randy Orton, but it's like, no man alive on this roster can beat me. And then as soon as he says that, you know, like, oh God, no, alive man, you're not setting up a dead man. Oh God. Yeah, that kind of thing. Like, it was definitely Randy Orton when it was like the Survivor Series and he was held up. He was the champion. Everyone was like, yay. I don't know why, because it's Randy Orton. And they had that celebration, because I think it was Raw versus SmackDown, one of them sort of deals. And then The Undertaker came out and just killed him.
They had a really boring feud, actually, thinking back to it. There was a lot of stipulations in the matches. I think there was a casket match at one stage, and I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I'm sure it was The Undertaker that actually got buried in the casket, and then the casket got set on fire or something like that.
Was this Bob Orton was around here as well?
Yeah, he was knocking about just for shits and giggles to draw the young audience in. It was the old boy.
Some 11-year-old going, yeah, Bob Orton. I know all the intricacies of his career. Moving swiftly along to the main topic of this, and you sort of briefly touched on this idea of like, if you're having to do open challenges, what is the point of like the booking, as it were? For a very long time now, there has been an on-screen presence who is supposed to be the guy that books the storylines. The GMs, the chief executive officers, they all have various different names, which essentially is to wield the power of just, I'm the guy that tells you what matches there are. And funny enough, I don't really understand this, that like we've been doing this now for nigh on 20 years and we still get to shows where the main event isn't booked. Like,
That's weird.
yeah, I always find that really strange, like this idea of like, it's your job to do the shows, and then 20 minutes into the show after someone's cut a promo, it's like, oh yeah, do you know what, and now you've given me a great idea.
Yeah, we'll run with that idea. Let's book
But
that
it's
match.
usually a variation of a theme of like, last week Roman Reigns fought Braun Strowman and 2 other people got involved, and 2 other people got involved. This week, we'll have a 3-on-3. But apparently, it takes them 20 minutes into the show while someone's recapping it to remind them of that.
Go have a think about it.
Yeah.
Make sure we got the right generic people.
But like, I think if you rewind this to the start, this whole idea of the figure of authority or the powers that be, and funny enough, that was a WCW thing if you want to go in depth that way. It started a lot earlier than you think in like Jack Tunney, the whole Commissioner, Foley, Shawn Michaels. But fundamentally, it all comes down to Vincent Kennedy McMahon, as many things do. And I think for me, this is, a lot of people talk about this idea of like, yeah, it really tapped into this idea of like Vince versus Steve Austin, and you want to get one over on your boss, and it's the working man versus the terrible figure at the head of the company that's trying to hold you down, and everyone loves that, and that sort of storyline. And while all of that is true to some degree, I think this basically comes down to, and this is not really said as much as it should be, how incredible of a performer in that role Vince McMahon actually is. Because if you'd have just had a guy come out with just very little charisma, maybe like a male Linda McMahon perhaps, and said, I don't want Steve Austin to be champion, it wouldn't quite have gotten over so well.
Yeah, but he built up his character over time, didn't he? It wasn't like all of a sudden he came out and he was Mr. McMahon. He did, like you said, it was a fucking wicked job, really, in terms of building up week after week, where you get more and more cheesed off.
Yeah.
And the old voice would start to break, and you could see the nuance.
That breaking of this idea of who's the boss off screen versus who's the boss on screen. And when the Montreal Screwjob happened, it sort of kick-started all of this in terms of whatever happened after that, you always had in your mind who was the guy.
Yeah, it blurred the lines, didn't it, too much, and then pretty much made him an on-screen presence. No, what I was going to say is going back to the Vince McMahon being the authority figure, essentially being a player manager, if you will. So following in the footsteps of Glenn Hoddle, Graham Strap-on, is that his name?
Gordon Strachan?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Gordon Strap-on and Rude Hullett.
Kenny Dalglish also.
Yeah, Baron Corbin, player manager. He's a constable now, essentially is the commissioner. So, are we getting that all over again? Are we getting Vince McMahon versus Steve Austin in the form of Baron Corbin?
And Finn Balor. Or again,
Prince Devitt,
and again, and
It's a
again.
royalty.
Yeah. I think casually you stumbled into this thing, which is sort of Vince McMahon versus Steve Austin, that whole thing that was built up, as you say, subtly, you got the nuance over time, and it worked. It caught lightning in a bottle, as the proverbial term is. And ever since then, they've done it time and time and time again.
I don't know, they haven't done it that many times, have they?
They have. It's like Triple H, Roman Reigns, Triple H, Daniel Bryan is a retread of Steve Austin, Vince McMahon. Every single heel GM is a retread of Vince McMahon.
I don't know, I think there's been enough GMs to water that whole sort of idea down in that situation.
I get it, but like...
You've got former wrestlers that are taking, or referees, that are taking this role as commissioner, and they're having no sort of active in-ring appearance. Like Triple H and Vince McMahon, as commissioners and authority figures, they still got involved, didn't they? They still had matches, but the likes of... It's a bit of a curveball here. You had AJ Lee, she wasn't performing. Mick Foley, he didn't have an in-ring presence that I'm aware of.
There were probably matches there and thereabouts, but...
Teddy Long,
Never.
he was never a wrestler, he was a referee though, and he was a manager, so he had in-ring interactions at least. He knew how to take a punch, didn't he? So,
Yeah.
But there was never anything along those sort of lines. Even going back, like you said about Jack Tunney earlier on, the likes of Sergeant Slaughter, they never got involved in matches when they were commissioners.
There's an interesting list you've built up there, and aside from AJ Lee, where there is severe blurring of the lines, if you want to use that phrase, every single one of them's a face. Faces don't, like, I'm talking specific heel GM. This idea, it's almost tied to this idea of heel managers. Like, back in the day, we'd have a unstoppable babyface, and the manager would be the heel, and he'd keep feeding them like heel guys, like Hulk Hogan would get fed this guy, then this guy, then this guy, all by the same manager, just trying to get one over. Like Bobby Heenan is the perfect example. Then eventually Hulk Hogan would get like his 5 minutes with Bobby Heenan, and that would be that. And you'd know that like if they ever got them in the ring, that'd be it, it'd be over.
Yeah.
And the difference between Vince and Triple H versus the rest of them is that like you could have that payoff of an actual match, and with Vince it generally tends to be a bit more carnage. With Triple H it tends to be a bit more sort of standard formula, but
Cerebral. Say cerebral.
it was, yes, it's definitely cerebral. Yes. Shoehorn that in there. Gotta get thank you, Vince, in my earpiece, trying to get the catchphrases.
Say the fucking words.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir.
Yeah.
All right, Maggle, calm down.
Jeez. But like all the face ones, like Teddy Long was a GM for how long? And that wasn't meant to be a pun, but like a good few years. Whereas you had your recycling of heel GMs on Raw. Eric Bischoff came and went, and I know he was there for a while, but like every single other person in that era sort of didn't have the same sort of sticking power as Teddy Long, who literally just came out, made matches, usually tag team ones or one-on-one with the Undertaker, and then left. A face GM or a face authority figure, it's easy to just be a cog in the system. The problem they've got is with a heel one, if any top babyface, you've got a natural sort of point where they're going to clash.
Yeah.
And then you end up in a scenario where Triple H is cutting 20-minute promos at the start of every Raw to try and like tell us what's best for business, and then book the same matches that we knew we were going to get anyway.
Could you see it actually happening then in terms of having like a face GM and a heel performer, where basically the GM puts him in a match and he's just like, nah, don't want to do it? Could you see it? Could you see the whole dichotomy being flipped on its head? Would that ever work?
I don't think it can.
So you got a heel like Kevin Owens, and the dream comes true and he actually teams up with Paul Heyman to be the advocate. So getting him, like finding loopholes basically in situations, and you've got like some shitty, snotty-nosed face GM or something like that.
Like Shane McMahon, perhaps.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just going to turn in favour of Kevin Owens, though, isn't it?
That's what I'm saying. Their storyline, Shane McMahon and Kevin Owens, is about as close as you can get to that in terms of heel-face dynamic, because Kevin Owens had legitimate points at various different points of that feud, and the problem you've got is that when you have the matches on commentary, when you have the commentators putting this over, and I think this is sort of a problem full stop, this idea, like, the difference between heels and faces is not what they do, it's what Michael Cole or whoever tells us during their matches. Kevin Owens can have a perfectly understandable gripe that he got screwed at a pay-per-view due to a referee, and everyone knows this, there's no doubting that.
Yeah.
But it's what the commentators have called, it's how he goes about it, which doesn't mean anything, because faces are allowed to like run in matches and hit people and do this and do that, but it's like, oh, he deserved it.
Yeah.
What for having a legitimate gripe. So with that in mind, it's easy to sort of book it in theory, whereby a face GM would take on a heel wrestler in that regard. I think the only way you could do it organically is just have them bully them. Just have a GM that's like Drake Maverick would be an easy example, and then have any big bastard just go, you put me in big matches or I'm going to fucking beat the shit out of you. And then you keep going until he reaches his breaking point, and then the match would almost certainly end up with the heel going over. Yeah. But at least you've built that in the way that you've said.
You've filled a bit of time, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've got a bit of product to the masses.
Yeah. The thing I would say about the Corbin role, going back to your earlier point, is this idea of, I don't really understand why that's a thing. Like, why would Stephanie McMahon, who's got Kurt Angle and doesn't like Kurt Angle, would just go, I'm going to pick some random mid-card heel, almost like a spin of a wheel, and just go, I'm going to give you some sort of power as well. They do this quite regularly because it's an easy way to get someone a spot on the show. And it's like almost a push, but not a push, if you know what I mean. Because they're getting on the show on a regular basis, they're in these prominent segments, they're able to sort of wield some sort of power, so in your head you go, yes, he may be sort of a mid-carder, but he's above that in a certain sense.
So why is he not booking himself in the main event picture?
It's a damn good point, actually.
If he's player manager, hang on a minute, I could have title shots that are sort of swayed in my favour every single week, and yet I'm still having a mid-card feud against Prince Devitt.
That would be a good way to get him over as a heel, if you're honest. Like, say you've got someone with the IC title, just continually book yourself in matches, and then obviously the rationale would be he's not quite good enough to beat whoever the face is that's defending the title, but he keeps doing it. So when he eventually wins it, it was an inevitability. He was going to book himself into that scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway. Going back to some of this idea of how we've gone from Vince to this, the Vince Steve Austin stuff, it sets the ultimate precedent. And then on the flip side, what you've got at the same time is two fellas that one would eventually go to WWE, one eventually came from WWE, or WF as it was, Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff, who regularly booked and got involved in the show and are, to this day, figures of great contention and amongst everyone, really. And they're as important as Vince McMahon in this regard, not necessarily quite as successful. Although, how you define that, I'm not sure. Because with Vince, you have that one feud that went over really well. With Bischoff and Russo, there's many feuds. So, necessarily, Vince had one good strike rate, but they kept shooting the shot, basically, and it just...
I think if you struck gold, and obviously Vince McMahon did strike gold when he did the whole Austin Vince McMahon angle, but the problem is everyone paints it as this glorious picture, and this is coming back to what we've said in the past about how the Attitude Era, yes, it was good, but maybe it's not as good as everyone was making out. You got to remember that feud only went on for 3 years at a push anyway, which in terms of wrestling nowadays, would that feud have worked in today's market? I don't think it would have.
No, it wouldn't.
It wouldn't have.
The
no
whole
way.
point I'm trying to make is that the Steve Austin Vince McMahon stuff is such a one-off in that moment.
Yeah.
Those two guys, that scenario, I don't think it can be repeated. So the idea that we keep trying to do this again and again is somewhat counterproductive.
I sound like devil's advocate here. Say you had Eric Bischoff on WCW, if you'd stuck him in exactly that same feud with
Goldberg?
Yeah, maybe Goldberg, maybe Sting at a push. I'm thinking more of a sort of working man's man rather than like a massive superstar that was really at the top of their game. Because yes, Steve Austin obviously knew how to perform, he knew how to talk on a microphone, but he still had that working class background, didn't he? That blue collar, connection, like you said. So, was there anyone in WCW that could have fulfilled that role? Maybe Goldberg, but he was already a brute of a man, wasn't he? At least Steve Austin seemed a little bit smaller than Goldberg, this unstoppable monster. And it obviously didn't help that Goldberg had this 500 million match win streak.
The other thing as well you're thinking of is that we've had, as you said earlier, the build-up for Vince as the guy, the company guy that wants to do everything for the WWF, even at the detriment of the guys in the company. Yeah. And the build-up of Steve Austin as some guy that's worked his way up. Whereas Goldberg, I know it was instant, but it's about as instant as you can get, really. He's winning the title within about 12 months. Yeah. And Eric Bischoff, as a character, you'd have to have a good, solid build-up of him being a guy that... I don't know why he wouldn't want Goldberg to be the champion. Whereas with Vince, that was well established even before he started fully on interfering with him. Because at the end of the day, Bischoff, with the powers that he had, and Vince with the powers that he had, you would understand how there's no way that if Goldberg gets his hands on Bischoff, he's not killing him. And the whole gist of it was, and I know Vince McMahon's built his reputation over the years, but the whole gimmick was that the moment Steve Austin gets his hands on Vince, that's it, it's a wrap. That's why you had them training montages, and that's why it was so entertaining to watch Vince the character grow up like that. Whereas, but the whole point is that they have the resources to help them through that, which is that Bischoff owns the company, Vince owns the company. They can just throw so many bodies in the way in between that the disparity between their strengths is negated. But I still don't think, having done all those parallels, it's the same, because, as I said, there's so much build-up and there's so much there for both guys that it wouldn't be, and I don't think it ever would be again, which is why the only other time it's even become close to working in the same way is Triple H Daniel Bryan. And what that had was a heavy grounding in what we perceive to be reality. It doesn't even have to be reality, it's what we perceive to be as reality, which was I don't think Triple H was necessarily, and Vince McMahon would necessarily going to Daniel Bryan week after week after the shows going, you're getting booked down the card now. I can hear the crowd reaction and we're not giving you a title shot. And I also, conversely, don't necessarily believe that was always the plan for him to win the title that way. But I think there was a sort of enough of a...
No, it was never... I don't ever think it was the plan, actually, to interject. No, it was never the plan. I think it was done on the fly because of the crowd reaction and the internet reaction that Daniel Bryan had got. Yeah. I say internet as an umbrella term for basically anyone that ever watches wrestling that may not actually be in the crowd at the time.
But then you go with other sort of heel GM figures and whatever may come of it. Vicky Guerrero versus anyone. Yes, she got heat, but was it ever going to be quite the same sort of draw? Stephanie McMahon.
No, that's man. I should have let you call your third GM, because now we were going down the route. As I only noticed when you actually pointed out, the GMs that I called earlier on, they were all heels.
Yeah.
Weren't they? Everyone. You're going down the route of, who was the third one you were going to name?
I wasn't.
Drax.
I was just going to talk about this, didn't I?
No, I was just going to say, because they're both women figures anyway, and so it was always going to be difficult. At the time Stephanie McMahon did it, maybe a bit easier for Stephanie McMahon, because you've got the whole women's revolution going on. Yeah. Even in its infancy, when Stephanie McMahon was this authority figure that came out on Raw for 20 minutes at the start of the show to talk and talk and talk and talk and basically achieve absolutely jack shit.
But the thing is that Stephanie McMahon is as close to anyone we've got to Vince. Like, she can be Vince.
From his own grapefruits.
Yeah, quite literally. But like, the difference between Stephanie and Vicky is that Vicky got her comeuppance on a regular basis. Stephanie, up until this year's WrestleMania, has never really had any comeuppance.
Did Vicky Guerrero get her comeuppance? Wasn't it just more a case of
humiliation on a regular basis?
Dolph Ziggler's lost, I'm going to scream, and Jerry the King Lawler's going to call me a bit porky and that.
Do you remember how Vicky Guerrero was sent packing on her official leave?
No, I don't. Was it for a pigsty or something like that with no clothes on?
Yeah. She did sort of get her vengeance by pushing someone in there, but like, I'm just like...
What, a cameraman?
Yeah, you put this woman through like God knows what, and the idea is that Vicky Guerrero would continually, as a heel, do bad things like booking wise and put baby faces in terrible positions. On the same token, John Cena would come out and cut promos that like absolutely destroy her, whereas anyone got anywhere near Stephanie McMahon at any point. Seth Rollins accidentally made Triple H push her through a table. Oh my god, that's for 5 years, that was it.
Never any sort of direct payback, was there?
No. I'm wondering with this whole idea of like, eventually you want to get them in the ring, eventually you want to have the babyface get the comeuppance, and that wasn't a legitimate drawing technique back in the day of like, I want to see this guy get his ass kicked, and he's definitely going to get his ass kicked, and that's going to be the end of it.
It's a great booking technique, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And week after week, and you can keep that going forever, because all you need to do is stick another body in the way, and you've built that feud up for the next 4 weeks, and you can just keep it going.
The match itself, it books itself. It's just like 5 minutes of the heel running away, effectively what Michael Cole versus Jerry Lawler should have been. And then the moment he puts his hands on him, that's it, that's all you have to do. The problem is that I don't think that...
Do those storylines have the longevity, do you think? They obviously do, for 3 years, as we've seen through the Attitude Era.
I don't think it works now.
Could you not keep that going? Could you not do an angle like that nowadays? And are you saying you can't do it because, like you said, as kayfabe has slowly disappeared over time, and reality's come in and we've all got a bit more of an inside understanding of the business, in inverted commas. Are you saying we can't do that because of it only being a small cog in the whole show?
Yeah.
Like, this angle's only a chapter in an episode, isn't it? And at the same time, like you said, you've got Michael Cole and the other commentators saying what needs to be said. You're being told rather than shown what's going on. You've got another 2 hours to fill, so we can't overexpose them, although we've got them on for an hour every week. And we've got a pay-per-view every bloody 4 weeks as well.
Less than that.
Jesus Christ, man, there's so much. And then a recap on the short Raw they show on Sky 1 in the mornings.
Just need to point out to everyone listening that you've just made a suicide gun motion.
To the head. Yeah, I'm done with this now.
Yeah. You're talking about all this in terms of the overexposure, but also the watering down of the position itself, because, as you said, as the years have gone on and we're a bit smarter, if you want to call it that, to the business, we know who's in charge. If you bring someone out and say they're in charge, I'll be like, no, just at no point would I ever be convinced that Baron Corbin has any actual power. But that's a bit different. Someone coming in as an on-air, off-air role.
He is. He's got keys to the Stanford offices.
Jeez.
He's the first one to show up, the last one to leave, locking the doors behind him.
But Baron Corbin's there at like 7 o'clock in the morning going, fucking hell, where's my car keys?
Sorry, Stu, can you stop calling him Baron as well? I think you're fine. He's no longer a Baron. He's a constable. All right, call him by his official title.
Jeez.
Constable Corbin.
I'm prepared to cut away about 60% of that first adjective. Yeah? Stibble. Yeah.
Sure.
That's probably more than 40, to be fair. But the thing is that, like, so I know who's in charge, I know who's not. If
Baron
you want
Corbin. Janitor Corbin.
Jeez. I'd take that, you know.
Dropping down the ranks.
So in that regard, you've got all that set up well in advance. So none of it quite has the same impact as when Vince is talking about Steve Austin. It's like, oh shit. There's an element of reality there in terms of, yes, I think he's got the power to do it, and also as well, there is an element of, I actually think that's what he believes. Same with Triple H and Daniel Bryan. With the interims in between, all the guys that we've had here, there, everywhere, guys, girls, this, that. And I'm going to switch companies here just to sort of establish my point. Wasn't there a point where like TNA had about 4 different authority figures on the same show?
Oh, what, all at once?
Yeah.
That's standard TNA.
Yeah, sure.
Not one point, that's all the time.
Yeah.
Throw more people in the mix-up somehow, we get a storyline out of it.
Yeah. It makes sense if you're trying to sort of have this really elaborate, really good storyline of like, yes, these 4 people have keys to the office, as you want to call it, but they're trying to sort of fight for power in a sort of very Game of Thrones style way. But no, it was just literally a case of like, let's get these guys on TV and continually buck them against each other, doing these really random things. And it's happened, I wouldn't quite go so far as to say that like it happens on Raw or SmackDown with the whole GM and general manager thing as well. But I think for clarification for the audience, really, you get confused as to what's really going on. If you've got like 15 different people trying to say, I'm in charge, what's the point? And what happens then is that you've got a load of people who say, I'm in charge, and then you feud with someone. That feud doesn't mean as much because it's like, yeah, you win that. There's like 14 other guys that's still in charge.
Yeah, exactly. If you excuse my French, I think the whole situation is a bit buggered, really. I mean this in terms of, if you're going to have the heel GM role of actually having the highest authority figure, so the Vince McMahon replacement, you're waiting a generation for that to actually happen, in terms of you're going to end up having Shane McMahon's child doing that now, because you already know the immediate McMahons.
Do you not think Triple H fits that role really easily?
Maybe, but then you're still going to have Stephanie McMahon essentially at the helm. Just because he's the patriarch, once Vince McMahon's done, doesn't mean he has the power still. It's still Stephanie McMahon.
But like, there are certain people now, there's a certain generation that only know Triple H in this sort of role. Like, they don't necessarily think of DX, the game, all of that. Like,
the Blue Blood, the best incarnation of Triple H. Yeah.
Or terrorising in WCW.
Oh, lovely stuff.
And so, this COO version of Triple H, the corporate Triple H, if you were. Fuck me, corporate Kane, we haven't even got onto that. Jesus Christ.
That's not.
Yeah.
Corporate Kane and Corporate Big Show.
Exactly.
Where they were working for the authority.
Yeah.
You know, there's a generation of people that have only seen that
exactly.
version of Kane and Big Show.
I would say I feel sorry for them, but like, what have you seen of the Big Show and Kane other than that they should go and check out?
It's your one opportunity to take that back about the Big Show. You know I love the Big Show.
Jericho, maybe.
Yeah, and that.
Yeah.
Show Miz. That one.
No, Show Miz is a watered down version of Jericho.
Oh, good stuff. Man, Big Show, what a guy. What a wrestler. I can't wait till he comes back. Till he has his...
he just got lost in a...
9th rebirth.
He just got lost in Paul White's eyes.
Love to. What a guy.
But like, so this idea of Triple H is what we have an established knowledge of who he is, not only as a wrestler, but also as that guy. So I think he works really well.
No, what I was going to say is, I said the one point about you're waiting for a baby McMahon or a baby Triple H to actually come along, i.e. they're spawned to come and fill that role as a potential head of a company. So you could almost recreate the Vince McMahon Austin angle. Or the Fed are in trouble because at the same time they're trying to make out that wrestling's a legitimate sport, but also keep kayfabe to some extent. Now, if you're going to try and make out that wrestling is a legitimate sport, you wouldn't have general managers in the capacity that they currently are.
I've got 2 words for you before you carry on, and I'm not talking about DX.
Is it Dana White?
It is.
I knew it. I read your mind.
It did.
That's my gimmick.
Yeah.
No one knows my surname, but they know Matt's a mind reader.
Psychic Matt. Mind reading Matt, actually. You've got to go with the alliteration.
Sure. If only my surname ended in R as well, started in R, that'd be good.
Mind reading Matt Reader. No,
fine, that'll do.
Yeah.
Anywho, let's forget Dana White for the time being. If you're going to make out wrestling's a legitimate sport, matches would book themselves. You'd have seedings, you'd have rankings of the way people perform.
There's no boxing booker.
You wouldn't get this, is it partisan? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
You wouldn't get partisan booking. would you? It wouldn't happen like that. It would be Manchester United would dick all over AFC Tottenham every day of the week. They would absolutely destroy them, and that's the same in wrestling. It would happen like that. It's the same in boxing, wouldn't you? Apart from the odd fluke victory where the underdog wins, you get the person that's the top of their game destroying.
In a really interesting way, it would be like as a sort of evolution. But the only problem is that boxing is seen now as such a backward sport that I don't know if this would work. But I'd be interested to see if you had like promoters, like you've got Eddie Hearn, Oscar De La Hoya, like Money Mayweather Promotions, whatever. Like,
Don King.
Yeah, Don King. Like Paul Heyman is perfect for that role. And you've got like a stable of guys, and you're trying to set up matches, and you're like, oh, is he trying to set up easy matches for his guys, or is he trying to set up legitimate matches for his guys?
Yeah.
As I say, I don't know if that system would work right now because boxing is not exactly like the hottest sport in the world. And maybe that is why the UFC connection and the parallel does work, because UFC is seen as that, and they do have one figurehead, and that's it. And like he never walks around going like, I'm gonna buck you against you.
But isn't that because it sorts itself out? He doesn't need to be doing that, does it? If you've got a legitimate contender that's climbed the ranks and you've got someone with the big belt, then you eventually challenge them. That's the way it should work in every sport.
Oh yeah, but
and that's if you want to go down that route with wrestling. And that's the problem. No, I'm gonna carry on, Stu. I'm putting my pint down. Yeah. I'm gonna carry on my point. That's what's ruined wrestling, because they can't seem to find the ground that they're looking for. Are we sticking with kayfabe, or are we making it a legitimate thing? If we're sticking with kayfabe, guess what, WWE performers? Get rid of your Twitter accounts. Apart from Big E, who's amusing on multiple occasions, thanks to you pointing it out to me, all the rest of them shouldn't be talking about mates and what they're doing outside of wrestling. I don't want to see Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns outside the Coliseum holding hands and bloody putting their arms around each other. Are we going down the reality route? If we're going down that reality route, have Roman Reigns come out on Raw next week, have Braun Strowman come out and go, all right, pal, that was a fun old time in Rome last week, wasn't it? That Coliseum needs a bit of work, but lol. Oh, and by the way, I'm challenging you for your belt. You should have expected it really though, because it's a competitive sport and we're both performers.
Well, it's certainly an impassioned rant. I think there is one question you do have to ask yourself though in this whole boxing, wrestling, UFC, real, not real, kayfabe, not kayfabe sort of thing, which is that like...
Who was the anonymous Raw GM? It was Hornswoggle.
It was Hornswoggle. It's always Hornswoggle. Yeah.
Was that the one question?
No, it's not.
Okay, sorry.
I do think you've mentioned like, the absolute bottom of GMs right there. There is actually a really good story about Edge like having a fight with the computer and the guy who played the voice, which is, I think, Dave Lagana, and it's just, you're giving me that crazy eyes. And just that whole thing is just really bad. But going back to this point you made, when boxers or UFC guys want to make more money, like Mayweather and Conor McGregor, or insert any big boxing fight of the last 10 years, everything they use is straight out of the wrestling playbook.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, it's drama though, and it is selling tickets. That's all it is. It needs to have an element of excitement. Why do you think Tyson Fury gets on Facebook and starts like chatting shit? Why do you think, what's his name, Deontay Wilder or whatever his name is, said he wants to have a body on his record? Jeez. Do me a fucking favour, you idiot. Don't say things like that. You're a tool.
Yeah.
You don't actually want to kill a man in your profession.
No.
But you still say things like that, all this bullshit, to make money, don't you? That's the whole point. So it needs to have an element of drama and action and excitement.
I like the idea that you just dismissed that I want to have a body on my record, given the idea of the amount of wrestlers that have actually driven cars at full speed at things and or their opponents.
They do it all the time.
They catch it all.
Don't worry.
It's fine. The laws of physics don't apply. So
what are you going to do? Get me in the wrestling ring and then get like 6 police officers around the ring? That's fine, I'll fight them off. Laws don't apply.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly fine. You can actually be dropped from a car on your head and then be there the next night at Raw with minor injuries.
A few scratches, a bump.
Yeah, why not?
It's alright.
Mate, basically what that proves is that these guys are much better than anyone else.
Well, that's why I watch wrestling anyway.
Yeah, because we've already decided it's better. Funny enough though, we spoke about this, we've weaved in and out of various different topics and subtopics around this, but I think aside from Vince McMahon, there is one guy that is actually doing some GMing as we speak, and he's done it, this is his third incarnation as a GM, and he's perfect for it, even though he's sometimes face, sometimes heel. That is my man, William Regal.
What a guy.
Yeah.
Blackpool's finest.
I don't know for why necessarily, but he appears to be sort of made for this in the sense of like, there is a legitimate idea that if you wanted to feud him with someone, you could. Mm-hmm. His promo / mic skills are of a level.
Yeah, ridiculously good.
And then every single time he's done this role, he elevates everyone around him. When he was first, like the Alliance Commissioner, we had him and Tajiri, which was perfect. The whole Jericho pissoning and the tea stuff. Classic. What people call Attitude Era segments, even though this is after the Attitude Era. Mm-hmm. The funny thing for me is that the one biggest missed opportunity here is when he was Raw GM, and just before he got sent away for wellness / drugs thing, and he was doing that gimmick where he was turning the lights off and pissing on the audience, and he was getting some major heat. And I actually think, legitimately, talking about who you could give toward the title feud, he was on a track there to feud with John Cena because of the sheer amount of hatred he was getting from the crowd.
He certainly broke the mould. Like what I remember of him when the whole invasion angle was going on, and there was like a few comedy segments. He always, as a heel, he always was like getting Tajiri's girlfriend in his, what was it called, the Regal stretch?
Yeah.
And like, they just seem like really heelish things.
Is he the only person that's kissed Vince McMahon's ass, like legit? Like clean look?
Nah,
like the Kiss My Ass Club? Like, yeah, but like, was that clean though? Like, I think
probably
Regal...
not. No, that's Regal buying into the role though, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, he seems to have broken the mould. In Hollywood, they seem to have this trope of, if you've got an English accent, insta-heel, you're a baddie because you're different, you're not one of us. As the NXT GM, he seems to have this ability of just being a mild-mannered, nice English person that's not a heel GM. He's not really a face either, to be fair. He's just sort of
perfect.
Just an overall role.
What he does, and this is sort of lost in the business as a concept, and I don't think this has ever really happened, because when I tend to talk about this idea of like heels and faces don't work anymore and there's shades of grey, right? That, for me, becomes a negative in modern wrestling because no one really knows who's who. Yeah. But for William Regal, it works perfectly because he reacts to every single person on his roster as NXT general manager as a person. When he's watching like some of the, like Bo Dallas and someone like that, and he has this sort of contempt on his face, it's not like because they're a heel or a face, it's because of what they're doing. Yeah. And like he seemed to take almost like a fatherly role to Bayley before she became God knows what on the main roster, and that in turn helped the character. And you're watching William Regal, and just a simple sort of pull of a face can go.
They can tell the story, can't they? It's showing, not telling. That old trope.
You're overacting the calculator. You found a word. You like it. We get it. It's fine. And I don't necessarily think that the answer to this is William Regal should be brought over to the main roster to be either Raw or SmackDown, anything, and I don't think he's perfect for what he's doing, and that's it. Let's just leave it there. The question I want to ask before we wrap this up is, do we need general managers or authority figures in 2018 full stop?
Fuck no, don't be stupid. Don't be stupid, Stu. Everyone knows it ain't real. Everyone knows that shit's fake. We've got a team of writers going backstage, going like the clappers on their typewriters trying to get this shit show together. You don't need general managers, you don't need that. Stop wasting airtime. For God's sake, put some wrestling on. I don't want 20 minutes of a general manager recapping last week and then saying, oh, I've got an idea, player. We don't need it anymore. As we've discussed, we haven't got anyone to actually fill that role unless it's Big Willie Regal. And then it's not a case of someone filling that role, it's more a case of listen to what William Regal's saying, get some reality behind your character. I know we said a lot of the wrestlers, they blurred the lines in terms of, is it kayfabe, is it reality, CM Punk being the prime example. All you do is you play like an enhanced version of your actual persona. Why don't you get that for a general manager if you're going to go down that route?
I know this is different, but CM Punk took that role on commentary for a while. And basically what that was is an excuse to, and they do this sometimes with wrestlers that can't necessarily perform in the ring, but are too good on the mic and get too good of a reaction. I think Kurt Angle is a good example of this. I think AJ Lee is a good example of this. Guys or girls that you want on the show. Paige, great example of this. Someone that you want to still be a performer, or someone that you want to still be there, but you can't necessarily have them be in the ring at the time. And then, obviously, the thing with CM Punk on commentary is that it led to him then attacking John Cena, then the Money in the Bank thing. It led on to something else. With everything else, it's what's the end game here? Because when Kurt Angle became GM, it was like, oh my God, we've got Kurt Angle back in WWE TV. Man, what a great coup for WWE. This is great. Having him back is amazing. 2 weeks later, oh no, we need to replace him. Hulk Hogan can come back. It's fine.
Getting cut by Stephanie McMahon.
Yeah. I think the bottom line here is the idea of a authority figure is practical but not necessary. The lower down the totem pole you go, I think a GM or authority figure works in the sense of we are literally about to go to a independent show, a local show around here, whereas they have a guy that's just like, he can say 2 sentences, and generally speaking that's all they do. They don't take 20 minutes to say like, you're feuding with this guy, and they're not even, you say they're faces, but they're not really faces or heels, they're just guys to connect the dots.
Yeah, not even tweeners. Just get a man out there to announce a match.
Yeah.
That's the difference with indie shows though, isn't it? You haven't got that following really. You've got your little cult following, but you haven't got the following of everyone actually like nitpicking all of the details.
That's the thing. A guy like that is there to take an audience that might not necessarily be familiar with the product week in, week out, to go from A to B. Oh, okay, I see this, you're telling me this, we're going to get this. But with WWE, they've got so many other ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Do we need that?
I'll tell you what I think our problem is in this podcast. We haven't spoken enough about what the rest of the general manager's responsibilities actually are. We've only talked about their main job, their main priority is to be booking matches. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but if you're a general manager, you need to be going around these different wrestlers and ensuring they've got the right clothes, they've got the right costume, their hair is done correctly, payrolls, paying them on time.
Jeez.
I think that comes back to the whole William Regal thing. William Regal in NXT isn't just booking matches. He's making sure, it's kayfabe, you idiot, I know that. But he's making sure contracts are signed, and you're actually seeing him backstage with contracts, looking at things.
Yeah.
He's not like Kurt Angle looking at his phone, reading a text message and going, uh-oh, I'd better phone such and such. He looks like he's doing administrative duties, which a general manager should be doing. So I think that would also help. You get, sorry, fucking hell. I'm just imagining like Baron Corbin, God knows, sorting out Kofi Kingston's hair or something like that. Make sure you look good for the camera.
Jeez, I was thinking about old Corbin doing some admin, and then it could be admin Corbin.
On Excel, getting the accounts ready. So I think that's what William Regal brings to the table. It's that sort of reality, at least.
The legitimacy of the full package.
Yeah, like an actual role, not just booking matches.
One of the things that always gets me is in these backstage segments, as you somehow try to compose yourself, which I doubt you're actually going to be able to do, is whenever they cut backstage, they're always in the middle of a phone call. Sometimes they're late, which I never understand.
Yeah.
This idea, like, Raw starts at the same time every week. I know the time zones are slightly different. But, like, if a general manager whose job or responsibility is to be there, like, if they're turning up 5 to 20 minutes into the show, like, at the very least, there should be a kayfabe reason for that.
Yeah, like think about any other business. If the manager doesn't show up on time, people don't still go out and do their jobs. Maybe they do, but sure as shit don't. If there ain't no one watching me, I don't do jack shit.
From a logistical point of...
Let's go and have a match. Why? The manager's not here telling us to do it.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be great.
Book our own matches. No, you're all right.
The general manager doesn't turn up to Raw for 20 minutes. It's an arena, a ring, and nothing happening.
Just at a train station waiting for him. It'll be here sooner or later, guys. Thanks, Maggle.
I like that. That's fine. I also like the idea of if your job is, or you're any way, shape or form responsible, how lax do you have to be with your job to be like, it's a live show, I'll roll in 20 minutes later.
Sorry. Oh, that's true.
I think that's a perfect way to end this now, is this idea of, like, basically, the more you scratch the surface with any of these kayfabe roles, the more you get into a realm of terribleness. And basically the gist of it is that, like, don't do it, because Vince has already done it to the apex of whatever it can possibly be done to.
Yeah.
So there's no point in retreading on storylines. Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon isn't happening anytime soon. But I look forward to 15 different more general managers being wheeled out in front of me in the next 12 months, so long as one of them isn't orange with a big tash. This has been Beyond the Beermat. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.